2:15 a.m. in the Buckeye district of Phoenix, Arizona. Neon fractures the night. Dealers crowd darkened doorways, and pimps push their product onto street corners. In the heart of Buckeye sits the Travel Lodge Motel, an easy mark for every punk and grifter who floats by. At 2:40 a.m., two men approach the lodge. The pair is buzzed in and approaches the front desk. From a back room, the lodge's owner, 66-year-old Dale Sechrist, emerges. One of the men lays a .22 revolver across the counter and directs Sechrist to the hotel safe. Sechrist opens it and reaches in for the money, but comes out with a loaded .38. Less than 10 feet apart, Sechrist and the would-be robbers exchange gunfire. A .22 slug finds the lobby's back wall. A second hits Dale Sechrist in the chest. An hour later, Dale Sechrist is dead. 5 a.m., homicide detectives arrive at the Travel Lodge and start to process the scene.
Two male blacks in the car with a gun.
The walls are littered with slugs. The floor covered in shell casings and blood. A trail found near the front door tells police Dale Sechrist hit one of the would-be robbers before he died. This smear on a pole outside indicates the bullet wound was probably high up, near the face or neck. In the days before DNA, nothing further can be gleaned from the blood. Detectives then turn their attention to fingerprints. The lobby is full of them, pulled off doorknobs, countertops, and walls. In 1974, the process is done by hand. In 8 hours of work, an examiner can compare a single lift against about 100 print cards. The chances of finding a match, slim and none. In the case of Dale Sechrist, no match is found. Over time, the investigation into his death suffers the same fate. Fewer print cards are examined. Promising leads are run down and out. The case of Dale Sechrist's attempted robbery and murder goes cold. October 1995. The city of Phoenix, as well as its police department, has grown. Inside the homicide squad, however, Ed Reynolds' office is typical, not much larger than a broom closet. From here, he sifts through old crimes, looking for a file that may hold the clue to a killer. 22 years after Dale Sechrist was shot and killed, Ed Reynolds pulls up the Travel Lodge folder. 10 fingerprints lifted from the hotel's lobby 22 years earlier are still unidentified. Of the 10 prints, only one has enough points of identification for a run through APHIS. On October 11th, 1995, Walmsley runs Reynolds' single print through the APHIS system. In a matter of minutes, the Travel Lodge lift is compared against more than 10 million sets of prints stored in the APHIS system. That morning, Ed Reynolds gets a phone call.
Latent print examiner calls me up and says that she's identified a latent print found on the inside of the door, the exit door that the suspects had to have exited from, to a subject by the name of Joseph Gillum.
Joseph Gillum's prints are in the APHIS system because Gillum himself is in prison, doing time for computer fraud. In 1974, Gillum lived in Phoenix, not far from the Travel Lodge. Reynolds has his first suspect. He starts with Gillum's criminal record.
All I could find is a shoplifting report where Gillum had been arrested, and his brother had been arrested for shoplifting several miles from there around that time.
Shoplifting is a long way from armed robbery, and an even longer walk from murder. Was Joe Gillum just an innocent visitor to the Travel Lodge in 1974, or did the then 16-year-old shoot it out with Dale Sechrist? Reynolds decides to pay Gillum a jailhouse visit. But first he pulls Gillum's personnel jacket. Among the items inside, a booking photo.
The first thing I noticed is I pulled his prison photos from when he was first sent to prison, and I noticed he had some unusual scars on his face.
One scar in particular, on Gillum's right cheek. It looks like it could have come from a bullet. Reynolds knows that Sechrist had managed to shoot one of his attackers. From the blood smears left at the scene, Reynolds also knows the wound was probably up high. On July 24th, Ed Reynolds meets with Gillum. As the interview unfolds, Reynolds decides to play a hunch.
I decided to go into this interview and leave him with the feeling that I already knew he committed this crime, that I already knew that one of the scars on his face was a result of this crime.
How about you? Had you ever been injured?
Yeah,
How?
I got shot.
And who shot you?
I don't know the person that shot me.
Tell me about that.
I kind of figured that's what this was about.
Reynolds' bluff works, and Gillum starts to talk.
I ride with this guy. We riding down Van Buren. We supposedly looking for girls. We pull into a motel. He turns to me and say, "Hey, you want to get a room?" I said, "Yeah." But still in my mind, I still don't know what's going on. Because we ain't picked up and talked to no girl or nothing. Next thing I know, shooting breaks out. Instead of you shooting the guy that's got the gun, you shoot me. That's how I got this. I hit the floor. Next thing I know, there's no more shooting. I get up, run out the door.
Gillum claims he never knew anyone died during the Travelodge shootout. He also contends he was not the shooter.
I was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
If you're telling me the truth, I know that you know the name of the guy that you were with.
Johnny.
Johnny what?
Riley.
Johnny Raleigh? Riley? John Riley.
Reynolds leaves with the name he needs. The man Reynolds believes may have fired the gun that killed Dale Sechrest. Now he needs to find Johnny Riley. Ed Reynolds starts his search for Johnny Riley in the criminal records archives of the Phoenix Police Department. There he finds Riley's misspent youth, a string of convictions for strong-arm theft and robbery. Of particular note, an arrest very close in time to the Travelodge shootout. Ed Reynolds next decides to pay a visit to Riley's old neighborhood.
I found his friends and the people that he associated with, and they all knew Johnny Riley as being the tough one in this group, the one that would be the guy most likely to commit an armed robbery.
Reynolds believes he may have identified his shooter. The problem is finding him. According to his friends, Riley left Phoenix in the late 1970s. At the same time, his string of arrests abruptly stopped. Ed Reynolds must now shift gears from a paper chase to a hunt through cyberspace. On the World Wide Web, there is a site called Faces of the Nation, a tracking system designed to access public records and find individuals. Reynolds uses the system to track Johnny Riley. In short order, Faces of the Nation finds Reynolds' man.
What I found was a church in Tacoma, Washington, where Johnny Riley was the pastor. A very motivating sermon that he would preach to his congregation was about the day that when he was living in sin, he and his friend Joe had done a robbery, and there was shooting involved and bullets were flying everywhere, and that God or an angel reached down and swatted the bullets away and protected him. And he used that as his profession of faith and his witness to his congregation that no matter how bad you are, that you can turn your life around.
On November 24th, 1997, Ed Reynolds sits down with Johnny Riley.
And there's a story that some of your, I guess you call them parishioners, would tell about your testimony or your witness to your congregation about a robbery that you and this young man did back in Phoenix when you were in trouble and before you had Jesus.
Riley admits that he and Joe Gillum attempted to rob the Travelodge. Then comes the key question.
Who had the gun?
I think he handed me the gun. He had the gun, he gave me the gun. I think I had the gun.
What kind of gun did you have?
I think we had a .22.
Johnny Riley has no idea that this is a murder investigation. When he ran from that crime scene 25 years ago, he didn't think he had shot anybody. He didn't think anybody was hit with a bullet, much less went down and died.
The day after this interview, cold case detective Ed Reynolds officially informs Riley of Dale Sechrest's death and arrests him for murder. A murder Riley confessed to without ever realizing he had killed anyone.
Hello, you've reached the Arizona State Prison Complex in Yuma.
Johnny Riley now resides here in Yuma State Prison. where he is serving 10 years for second-degree murder. Joe Gillum received a similar sentence for manslaughter and does his time across state.
I think one of the last things he told me in the last interview I had with him was that if he had known 25 years earlier that he had killed that man, that he would have turned himself in 25 years ago.